Hello, and welcome to Social Studies Teachers Have Issues. I'm Dr. Heather Ballinger.
And I'm Dr. Kyle Ward.
The main objective for this webcast series, and like any good educators, we have objectives to meet, is to try and help social studies teachers who are stretched too thin, both financially and with the amount of time they can put into prepping for their classes. This lack of time and money often hurts teachers when it comes to vetting some of the better teaching resources that are already out there.
To do this, we are interviewing education experts from a series of museums, libraries, and institutions. Interesting enough, many of these organizations suffer from the same issue of not having enough time or money to reach out to teachers across the country, and often have to rely on social studies teachers basically stumbling across their website or randomly finding their professional development programs in order to learn more about the resources they have.
With that in mind, the issue we're going to deal with today is how to teach about Japanese American internment during World War II. In order to learn more about this subject and how to teach about it, we'll be interviewing Sybil Kawano, the education expert from Mountain Interpretive Center. Welcome, Sybil. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Sybil, I'm going to start off with some basic questions right away. The biggest one is, how did you get to this position? What's your background? What brought you into education, interest in history, things like that?
So I have a degree in public history from Athens State University in North Alabama, and I'm from Alabama, as you can tell by my accent. But when I was in high school, I went on a trip to DC, and I went to um, the American National Museum, and saw this lovely exhibit about the First Lady's dresses, and was just blown away and thought, I want to do something like that. And so I went to Athens State. And then while I was there, I was doing an internship at a very small house museum. And these two women that I worked with, Bruce and Pam, they really encouraged me to go to grad school to get a master's. They said, if you want to go far in the museum world, you should go grad school. So I went to the Cooperstown graduate program in Cooperstown, New York, and got a master's in museum studies. Um, and I really enjoyed museum education and kind of that side of education or of museum, the museum world. There was a lot of fields I could go into within the museum, and I really thought maybe collections was the way I wanted to go. But when I graduated, I kind of realized, like, no, I think museum education is my path. Um, and so the month before I graduated, I was looking for jobs, as graduates will do, and I came across a job on LinkedIn um, for Heart Mountain. This AmeriCorps Vista position, popped up on my feed, and I applied for it, and I was able to get it. So I originally came to Heart Mountain as an AmeriCorps Vista, and I served 1 year. And then after my 1 year of service term, I was offered a full-time position as the education manager here.
Great.
Heather, before I turn to you, can I ask real quickly, AmeriCorps Vista? What is this?
It's kind of like the Peace Corps. So AmeriCorps Vista is a service program. There are many like locations across the country. I'm here in Powell, and I was at Hart Mountain, but I also had many cohort here that was at the Homesteader Museum and like the Bureau of Land Management. AmeriCorps Vista, you do a 1 year service term, and it's kind of like an internship, but you go to places who maybe can't afford, a staff member, or they need help. And it's a lot of times it is recent grad. So people who are fresh out of college looking for jobs. But yeah, it's a 1 year service term to help out in many different kind of professions and areas.
Thank you. Heather, go ahead.
Yeah, that's great. I was wondering the same thing. And I can see like a lot of teachers recommending that to future students. So thank you for taking the time to kind of walk us through what that is. AmeriCorps is a great organization. So now that you're in this position full time, what does your day to day work look like? Or are there any like projects you're working on or have coming up, or things that you do? So I'm curious, just what's your role and what do you do in this position?
Well, it depends on the season as to what I do day to day. But right now, it's a lot of emails. So we are kind of in the throes of getting ready for workshops. And I am the one like planning, doing the transportation and the lodging. So I'm currently doing a lot of emails back and forth with participants and teachers. Um, but aside from the workshop, I'm also the field trip staff member. So I plan, schedule, organize all of those. Like yesterday, we had an in-person field trip in the morning, and then this morning we had a virtual field trip with a school in California. And right now is kind of the field trip season, March, April, May. So we do like every day. It seems to be one or two field trips that we're doing. um, and then I also do all of our educational resources, curriculum, things like that. So I'll be working on that. And I am part of the exhibits team. We have an upcoming exhibit about the draft resistors. So I have been reviewing our panels that will go up. But right now, kind of workshops is the big thing. We have a 1-day teacher workshop coming up in April, and then we have a 1-week workshop coming up in June. So we've got a lot of stuff going on.
Is that are these workshops something that you offer every year, or is this something new that you kind of invented?
So it's kind of a little bit of both. So these are new workshops under new grants, but they're kind of like we've already done 1-day workshops under different grants, but this is under just a different grant. But yes, so this is under the JACE grant. So JACE stands for Japanese American Confinement Education. We received a grant under that, and it's part of the National Park Service, I believe. And so through this workshop, we will be doing 1-day teacher workshops in kind of the confinement sites in the Rockies. So we're doing one here in Wyoming, then Montana, Idaho, Colorado, Utah. And then we will also be going to some of the states that offer or they require Asian American history to be taught. We'll be going kind of to those as well. So like Florida, I believe Illinois, some of those states as well to do 1-day teacher workshops. But then the week-long workshop we do, it is brand new and it is called Lessons from Incarceration, the Maurice Walk Memorial Workshop. And so this is for teachers all over the country. They can apply and they will come here for a week to learn about Japanese American incarceration and to really get that place-based learning here on site.
That's great. The other thing that you mentioned that I was that piqued my interest was a virtual field trip. What does that look like, or how do I get signed up for that?
So you can email me if you would like to, or you can find the information on our website. But we go through the museum and we have multiple themes you can choose from. So you could do like the camp, children, of Hurt Mountain, women. And I will take you on a tour through the museum. Usually we'll start with kind of pre-war. So what led to Japanese American incarceration. And then we'll talk about what life was like in camp for the incarcerees. And then we'll do a very quick kind of conclusion. But yeah, we get to tour you through the museum and tell you about Fort Mountain.
Thanks. That's really interesting. I like it.
A couple quick questions here too. One, did you take a lot of event planning classes when you're getting your master's degree? Did you realize that was going to be a big chunk of your future job?
I did not, but I'm learning on the job. And luckily, our executive director, Rebecca McKinley, or excuse me, our deputy director, she has helped me and like taken me under her wing and helped me with events because yeah, I didn't realize this much event planning was going to be going on.
And Heather, I wasn't keeping tabs. It sounds like she's wearing 7 or 8 different hats. Did you get that many too here? Is that about right?
Seems like a lot of hats. I was like,
Yeah.
I started to write down. I was like, whoo, I got tired about four jobs in.
Um, so the next question I have is, I'm a middle school or high school teacher. I teach U.S. history or I teach government. And if I'm teaching U.S. history, there's just this march of things I have to get through. And if I'm stereotyping social studies teachers, I'm just as guilty. World War II is a really interesting topic, but I want to talk about Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge and all these things like that. Can you explain to teachers who are listening to this, why should I take time out to learn about the Japanese American incarceration? What's the significance of this? Why should my students learn about this subject?
Yeah, I think that Japanese American incarceration is often overlooked, and it's not told. We get a lot of people saying, "Man, I wasn't taught this in school. I didn't know this happened." Um, and I think it's very important to talk about because there were around 120,000 Japanese Americans who were forced from their homes on the West Coast, and they were placed into 10 War Relocation Authority incarceration camps, um, many of whom were American citizens, and yeah, their Fifth Amendment right was violated. They didn't have a speedy trial, and so this was, very real things that were just kind of overlooked. And I think it's very, very important for students to know their constitutional rights and for them to know how to stand up for their fellow citizens and to know, when something's wrong, how to stand up, and not necessarily follow along. Just, to be able to question the government and to question in general, just say, "Hey, I hope this is right. Let me do a little research. Let me figure it out," and to really, stand up for their fellow citizens and to look back on history and say, "Oh, this has happened, and this is what we need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. Or if it is happening, here's what I can do to help."
Yeah, that's a great example. Something I've learned, Heather and I have been talking to other people who work in museums and things like that too. Are there any misconceptions out there? Do people come to the museum and say things and you're like, no, you don't understand? Or are you watching movies and hearing things in pop culture where you go, They just don't quite understand." Is there something that stands out to you?"
As I said, there were around 120,000 Japanese Americans who were incarcerated. And I think a lot of visitors kind of get the notion that it was just one experience for all, but really showing that no, each incarceree had their own individual, unique experience. And, one incarceree might have an experience that was very different than another. And to really show that and highlight that each experience is different. And you can't just say, "Oh, every Japanese American had this experience. It was good or bad or whatever." You've really got to take each experience as its own and see all experiences.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I'm, on this theme that Kyle mentioned about being a classroom teacher, if I'm a classroom teacher and I go to your website, what resources do you recommend that could help me teach my students and sort of bring this subject to life? Maybe a home run activity that's really popular with teachers or anything like that that you might want to share.
So one really big activity that we do that I think teachers really enjoy, we do a primary source activity. So there is a young incarceree. His name was Stanley Hayami. He was 16 years old when he was here at Park Mountain, and he kept a diary. And we get a page out of his diary, and students look at it, they read it, and we discuss like what was he thinking? Why might he be thinking or feeling this way? Um, and so we have students kind of dig and observe into this diary entry, and then we can also kind of adapt the activity. Instead of a diary entry, we can have students look at a photo by Yoshio Okamoto, who was an incarceree. Um, and we can have students, predict what they think will happen, 1 minute after this photo was taken or 1 hour. And then for, say, middle or high school students, when we want them to, think a little bit deeper, we can show them like a series of Yoshio Okamoto photos. And then we can show them a series of the government photos because the government photos are vastly different than the Yoshio Okamoto photos. And so we can show them these two different sets of photos and show them, okay, if you were to see the government photos and only the government photos, what would your idea of Japanese American incarceration be? you'd get this idea that everybody's having the time of their lives, that everything's hunky dory. But when you see those Yoshio Okamoto photos, you see like, oh, okay, this is much different. We're getting a realer version of what was going on. And so I really think the primary source analysis is very good. And the Yoshio Okamoto photos, though we own those, they are actually available on Densho, so on the Densho website. But I can pull up our website and I can show y'all some some stuff that we offer and that I think that will be really, really good.
And the Densho, is that going to be connected through your website? Can they go to the Densho through it? Do they need to look up separately?
Will need to look up that separately, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, and so this is our website, heartmountain.org. And if you go under Learn, you will see our education page. You'll also see that we have a website or a web page for our workshops, our online programming, and the podcast that we have. But if you click on education, it will take you to our education page, and you will be able to find some upcoming education opportunities for teachers. And then our internship opportunity, the Curtis Ando internship, is for local Park County junior and seniors in high school. But then if you want to schedule an in-person field trip, you can do that here. And then if you wanted to schedule a virtual field trip, you can also do that here. And then we do have some classroom resources here. However, I am going to update the classroom resources so it's not on a tablet and it's just on our website. So that will change. But we also have reading guides. So if you are a teacher and you're looking for a book that you want to read with your class, A Boy of Heart Mountain is a chapter book, and that's really good for elementary students. They Called Us Enemy is a graphic novel, and I really love graphic novels for teaching Japanese American incarceration. There's 3, I believe. So there's They Called Us Enemy. There's one about Norman Mineta and Al Simpson. It's From Behind Barbed Wire to Washington. And then there is one by Frank Abe, and it's about the draft resistors. I cannot remember the name of that, but yeah, if you're looking for graphic novels for your class, and I think middle schoolers do really good with graphic novels, there are a few to select from. And then for high schoolers, there's We Are Not Free by Tracy Chi. And all these 3 books here, they come with a reading guide. So as you read, you can go through the guide with your class. But then I also want to talk about some other resources. So if you go to collections, you'll find research, digital resources, Heart Mountain draft resistors, and artifacts and archival donations. If you go to our digital resources, you will be able to find first the roster. So the final accountability roster is a huge resource. If you want to find an incarceree who was here, you will be able to find that here in the roster. So if you click on one of the names, it'll take you to the roster. And in the roster, you're going to find the name, and then you'll find their family number, as well as their address here at camp, their date of birth, their marital status, citizenship status. You're also going to find their temporary detention center, the date that they came to Heart Mountain, their original town or city that they were from, and then the date they left and why they left. So this is really good information if you're searching for someone. And one thing I really like to do with the final accountability roster is back to the Yoshio Okamoto photos. So if you pick one, that you like, there's usually a name on the back of who the person was. And maybe it's a baby or, a senior in high school. And so you can find their name in the roster and you can kind of dig and do a little bit more research. You can see, oh, they left and they went to Chicago. And then you can search the Heart Mountain Sentinel, which is the newspaper that was in camp. And you can find this on our website here. So if you go down here, the the Sentinel, along with all of the incarceration camp newspapers, are located on the Library of Congress. And you can just click that and it will take you here. And then from here, you can just do a very simple search, like say Norman Mineta, and then type in Heart Mountain Sentinel. And then from there, it should pop up every article that has Norman Mineta. Let's see right here. Apparently there's only a few of Norman.
That's
One
amazing.
really cool.
It's highlighted.
Yeah. And one really cool thing about this, so it shows those leaving. So here it shows that Norman and his mother left camp for Illinois. So it shows them as well as anyone else who had left for Illinois for around that time. And one really cool thing about this as well, so in the Sentinel, when incarcerees were leaving, many would write like goodbyes or thank you letters, kind of little advertisements in the newspaper. And so you can see these, and it'll have their address that they were at. So maybe they were in like 24-7C. So that's like block 24, barrack 7, room C. And they will have like a thank you. Thank you for having us. We enjoyed our time here at camp, but more of like, in solidarity, this is a hard time, but we spent it together, thank you. And then we also have one really cool thing that I think will be really good for teachers who teach government or civics. We have the Heart Mountain Draft Resistor files. So Heart Mountain was the only camp out of the 10 WRA camps that had an organized draft resistance. So there were two groups. The first group, which is the picture you see here of the men in the courtroom, this was 63 Nisei men, the first group, and then the second group was 20 Nisei men. But here you'll find a list of like all of their names. So you can click on one of the first letters, like A through I, and then you can click on a draft resistor, and then you're going to find a biography of the draft resistor, as well as his loyalty questionnaire. So each incarceree who was over the age of 18 had to fill out a loyalty questionnaire. And so you get to see how each draft resistor filled out their loyalty questionnaire. We have that here. But then you can also find their case file. So any other files that would be attached to that draft resistor, you can find that here. So you have a good bit of information. And one really cool thing about the draft resistors, I think, is that you can show your students that these men were making some really tough decisions, and that it's not just, oh, they're cowards and they don't want to fight. It's no, they have families. There's one man, Tom Kubo. Let me pull him up. His wife, she had 3 young children, and so he didn't want to serve because he had to take care of his children. And his wife, she ended up having to send their children to Topaz to relatives so she could go find work. Right here, Tom Kubo. And you have so many different stories. They are seen as enemies, as not citizens, and they're forced into these camps. And then they're being told, no, you've got to do your citizen duty and you've got to fight in the military. And so they're making these tough decisions, what is right, what is wrong? How do we prove our loyalty? But also, how do we respect our own citizenship? How do we stand up for our own constitutional rights? They had their constitutional rights taken away, and now they're expected to be citizens and go fight. So I think the Fair Play Committee and the draft resistors are a really cool lesson and a really cool way to get your students thinking about, their constitutional rights and what their duty is as citizens. And then I also want to go to the online programming right quick. And I want to show all of the teachers, all of like the online programs we have. So there's a bunch of videos on a bunch of different topics. featuring Heart Mountain and Japanese incarceration. But we have some on art and culture, as well as like the yellow peril and how that connects to COVID. We also have it on the draft resistors and like notable women of Heart Mountain. We have some original short films. And then we also have a Dusted Off live series. So the Dusted Off series explores objects we have in our collections. So objects that we haven't brought out or, displayed in a while, we dust those off, we show those. So you can get a good look at those. And then we also have some videos on Setsuko's Secret, which is a book by Shirley Ann Higuchi. So we really have a lot that you can really look for and look through. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. See?
Thanks, Sybil. That's awesome. I love the idea of the connection you made to civics educators and the draft resistance. And I think that's something that would really connect with students. And I agree with you. I think graphic novels are the way to hook sort of like reluctant readers of so many of which we have now, because they can watch most of the things on their screens. So, like all of those are really great recommendations, and I can see them being adapted for many different, grade levels and things. So thanks for showing us your resources, and they look really well organized. And it seems like I really like the priority that your organization has placed on the sort of exploration and documentation of all these primary sources, because I really think that is often the forgotten part of history, is sort of just like noodling around in what you're interested in. So, we do History Day in most schools that I partner with, and this would be a great topic for a lot of students like to choose Japanese internment and do their project on injustices in history, which I think this is a great example of it. But I love the idea of them doing like a snapshot of maybe one incarceree and talking about sort of their trajectory, how they came, and sort of what their journey through their time that they spent at Heart Mountain might look like. So I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
And I'm just going to pick up from there too, because I'll applaud you for the draft resistors. But what I also like too is something teaches about World War II is that a lot of the Japanese young men will join the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, 100th Infantry Battalion. These are going to be the all Japanese American, but they're going to be some of the most decorated units during all of World War II. So you got citizens. It's a good thing to talk to students about is what makes a good citizen, by resisting the draft because of the situation you're in, or by serving the country because of the situation you're in. That's a fascinating topic. And then,
I think
oh, sorry.
one thing that's really kind of um, kind of fascinating about that. So, talking about Stanley again, Stanley eventually would be drafted, and he would go on to serve in Europe, and he would sadly be killed in action. But Takashi Hoshizaki, who was also from the same neighborhood as him, who was the same age, he was a draft resistor. So you have these two men, same age, very same background, and they have two different trajectories. And last year, Takashi turned 100 in October, and had Stanley lived, he would have turned 100 in December. And showing these two men together and showing that they are both doing their duty, they are both being good citizens, they are both having these hard decisions as 18, 19-year-old men to make. And so we like to highlight both the 442nd members and the Fair Play Committee members to show just how hard it was, just how different the reality was for everyone. Each incarceree had that, different experience, and they had their own lives and families to think about, and how that would, depend on what they would do.
Yeah, very true. Heather, this is the portion where Sybil gets to plan and do the work for me for my fall class, because I'll be teaching my World War II class here. Sybil, let's say somebody teaches a World War II class and has history majors who are interested in doing more research. will just randomly come up with this topic here. And you kind of mentioned some, and I already wrote down like 4 or 5 things my students are going to be thanking you for later on because of the extra work. But if a student wants to do research, and actually this is kind of funny, just yesterday, one of our graduate students, she is doing research on Japanese Americans in the South during World War II with Jim Crow and making that kind of combination. But if I sent a student your direction to your website, what kind of help could they get? What kind of research, what kind of artifacts, resources do you have for that?
So, a student or kind of anyone wanting to do research, they can get in touch with our collections manager, Rachel Soloway. And if they wanted to come here on site, they could do research in the LaDonna Zoll Library, or they could see a couple objects. Rachel could pull objects for them to look at. And then if they were not able to come here, they could get in touch with Rachel and she could send them scans or photos of artifacts or objects that we have. Um, we are currently working on kind of making our digital collections accessible and kind of on our website. It's not on our website yet, but we are able to send it out if you get in touch with us. So yes, if you get in touch with me or Rachel, and we can definitely send you any artifacts or any pictures of objects you would like. But we also have Mickey McDaniel. He's the development or membership and development manager, and he does family research. So if there's a specific person you're looking for, he can do a deep dive research into all of the papers that we have, like the Final Accountability Roster, the Sentinel. He usually also goes on like Ancestry. He can also look at the government documents. So if you really wanted to do a deep dive into a person or a family, you could get in touch with Mickey McDaniel, and he could really help you find more information about that person.
Before we're done, remind me, I'll get to the names and the emails of those so we can post those for people who are listening. That'd be great here. Heather, can I throw it back to you?
When you were checking out, when you were showing us your website, you mentioned a couple workshops and professional development or like educator institutes that are available. Do you have one that you want to just share a little bit about that's coming up, or summer things that are happening that we should be aware of, or anything like that? Even a newsletter?
Yes. So we actually have a lot of workshops coming up in the next couple of years. So if you can't get into one this year, you have chances the next few years. So just check
Great.
our website and you'll be able to get more information. But we have the walk workshop is what we call it, but it's the lessons from incarceration, the Maurice Walk Memorial Workshop. It's a longer name, so we tend to like say walk workshop. But we're very excited to have this workshop because it is a 1 week workshop where teachers from all over the country come, and we have teachers in all types of subjects. So not just history, we've got English, math, art, library, media studies, and so they're able to come here and they're able to, learn about Fort Mountain. They're able to see the site. We get to take them on a tour of the barrack, of the root cellar. We get to take them on the hill and show them where all of the barracks were. And now today it's just private farmland. And we also get to talk with them and we get to, see what is the environment like in your classroom. How do you need help teaching this? Because we may have a teacher who really needs to kind of craft and be very meticulous in how they teach this topic, and then you have a teacher who's like, oh, my students, they can really grasp this because maybe something in their life they connect with. And so it's very neat to get to have all these teachers from all different places to come together and really, talk and discuss and kind of see the best ways to teach Japanese American history and to really get it out there so that people want to teach it and that it's touching as many people as possible.
So it sounds like the best way is to check out the website, check regularly, know that if we can't do it this year, there's future things. And I love to hear that you've got a bunch of grants going and funding available to continue this work. Do you have a newsletter that we can sign up for, or any way to stay connected, or is the website just the best place to go?
The website is the best place to go. But if you do ever have a question, feel free to email me or the info
Okay,
account, and I will get back to you as quick as I can.
great, perfect.
Are there costs associated? Like somebody from California, Minnesota, Florida wants to come, the costs that go along with it?
So yes, for the walk workshop, there's a $2,000 stipend for participants who are selected.
Wow, that's fantastic. Um, a quick question I had too is a couple follow-up questions here. One, if I'm a teacher, I'm listening to this, and like we said before, and actually in my social studies methods class just a couple nights ago, one of my students, we were talking about stories that don't get covered in U.S. history, and the very first thing somebody said was the Japanese American internment here. So it's one of those hidden stories in American history. What resources are out there for a teacher who's brand new to this subject or a student who's brand new to it? Do you have any recommendations of things, documentaries, films, books you would suggest?
Yes. So there are some really good films. There's All We Could Carry, which is directed by Stephen Okazaki, and his father was incarcerated here at Heart Mountain, and it talks about Japanese American incarceration through the perspective of Japanese Americans. So in it, there are many incarcerees who are interviewed, and they're telling you, their experience. There's also A Flicker in Eternity, which is a film about Stanley Hayami and his diary. It's a lovely film. And Stanley's diary is actually at the JANA Museum, so the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles. So if anyone would like to learn more about Stanley and his diary, you can look at JANA on their website. But also in terms of books, there's two really good ones. So, Heart Mountain: The History of an American Concentration Camp by Doug Nelson. This is a really good book if you want to learn the history of Heart Mountain specifically. And then, When Can We Go Back to America? Voices of Japanese American Incarceration During World War II by Susan Kamei. And this shows a lot of different personal stories. So you get to hear different Japanese Americans who went through incarceration. So those are some good places to start.
Great, thank you. And then one quick question before my final question. You mentioned the virtual tour. What is that all encompass? How long does that take? If I'm a teacher and I want to bring something like this in, how does that work?
So it is a 45-minute tour, and we do it either through Zoom or Google Meet. It costs $100, and you can get in touch with me. And we have 6 themes, but if there's something specific that you would like for us to cover or talk about that's not within the themes, we can definitely do that. We can tailor it to your needs. We also end with a question and answer portion, so students get to ask any questions they may have. But I send some resources before the virtual field trip, so students can kind of already see and kind of know some maps and some pictures. So they're kind of get used to them before we start the tour.
So Heather, if I understand this right, Sybil could take over about 3 or 4 weeks of my class in the fall. Is that about right? Okay, I want to make sure we have that.
Sounds like an excellent idea.
My students don't want to listen to me that long, so I'll be more than happy to have her come in and talk about all this here. The last question I have is, working in a museum and a site like this, is there an artifact, a document, is there something there that really resonates with you, something that you think is like really exciting, really key to the whole story?
Yes, my favorite object. So we have a baseball bat that was gifted to Norman Mineta. Do y'all know Norman Mineta? So
Mhm.
he was incarcerated here when he was 10 years old, and he was from San Jose, California. He loved baseball. And on the day he left California at the train station, he had his baseball bat, his glove, and his ball. And the military police, they took away his baseball bat because they said it was a weapon. And he was so
Oh,
sad. He went crying to his father, and he was just so upset. He could not understand why anyone would think his baseball bat was a weapon. Well, flash forward, Norman Mineta goes on to do great things. He's the first Asian American to become, a mayor of a major U.S. city, San Jose. He's the first Asian American on a presidential cabinet. He serves under George W. Bush and Bill Clinton. And Hank Aaron, Major League Baseball player Hank Aaron, hears this story of Norman Mineta having his baseball bat taken away, and he signs a baseball bat. Hank Aaron, along with a Japanese baseball player, Sadaharu O, they sign a baseball bat and they gift it to him. Now, I also want to point out that Norman Mineta was the Secretary of Transportation during 9/11, and he talked with Bush. Bush knew that, he was incarcerated. And because he knew Norman's story, when 9/11 happened, and there was this fear that people were saying, oh, we need to round up Muslim Americans, we need to round up Arab Americans. George Bush said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do to Arab Americans what we did to Norm. And so I think it's such a fascinating story that Norman, this happens to him and he goes on to do great things. And all these leaders, they really hear his story and they take it. And to me, it's telling me you learn your history and you're not going to repeat it. So you see George W. Bush learning his history. He's making sure that there are all different types of people at his table, and so he's learning everyone's story and he's learning from it. And so it's helping him be a really great leader in the future. And yes, I love the Norman Mineta story and the baseball bat. And it's like there's so many connections. So that's my favorite. Yeah.
That's a fantastic story. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Sybil, for meeting with us. I think it was so interesting. It's sounding like the best way to for teachers that are interested in learning more about Heart Mountain or your work in the organization to just contact you over email.
Yes, email
Yeah,
is
we'll
the
have
best
the
way. Yeah.
email and all the resources in the show notes so that teachers can access them. But also for you teachers out there, thanks for tuning in to Social Studies Teachers Have Issues, and we hope to see you next time. We hope today's episode sparked new ideas and gave you practical tools to bring history and civics to life in your classroom. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe, share with your fellow educators, and connect with us online for resources and upcoming episodes. Together, we're building a stronger community of teachers and shaping the future of education one resource at a time. Until next time, keep teaching boldly and stay curious.